Detroit Pistons select Cade Cunningham, Oklahoma State University.
Oh, you're ready.
Popped up now. Which camera I'm looking at? I'm in this one.
Yeah, you're in this one right here.
Detroit, I'm all the way in. Detroit Pistons, I'm all the way in. Let's do it.
Well, I cannot confirm or deny that I have watched that or listened to some variety of that clip 700 times since it first aired last night on ESPN. Welcome back to the Spiro Avenue show. Every episode is special. Every episode is wonderful because you're here with me, and I always have the most brilliant guests, and everybody knows it. Tonight's extra special, and we all know why. It's Cade Cunningham celebration time. We'll get to that in just a minute. A lot to get to. I'm pumped. I'm pumped for our guest making his Grand Spiro Avenue debut, but we have to acknowledge who keeps the lights on around here. It's not me. I love my guests, but it's not them either. It's our sponsors, and we have a wonderful one tonight. Again, one of our newest ones yet. Wade Fink Law, wadefinklaw.com. That's not a pseudonym. That's the guy's actual name, not the law part, but the Wade Fink part. Wade Fink, a brilliant defense attorney out of Birmingham, Michigan, a longtime friend of mine, actually went to high school with Wade, can vouch for him to the highest extent. And if you recognize that name and the law and the Fink thing, it's not because you're crazy. It's because he is the son of Neil H. Fink, arguably the greatest defense attorney of all time in Metro Detroit. Look it up. And also the son of Kimberly Stout. It is a legendary legacy in Birmingham. They're all attorneys. I think the dog might be getting his law license pretty soon, in fact. So if you're thinking of breaking some laws, I can't recommend it. I would advise against it. But if you have to break the law, Wade does have your back. They're calling him the Jewish Johnny Cochran. He'll get you off of anything. So it's like, I'm Gerard Butler. Okay, I'm a law-abiding citizen. So I would never do anything. But if I did, if I felt like knocking over a 7-Eleven, I'm calling Wade Fink. He's the guy. Check him out. WadeFinkLaw.com. WadeFinkLaw.com. Wade at WadeFinkLaw.com. If you want to email the gentleman, he's brilliant. Highly recommend him. Thank you for all the support from Wade. He's the man. Stay out of trouble. If you get in trouble, call him up. So let's get to it. I'm not going to lie. It's been a rough decade here. Everyone knows that has watched the show for more than 10 seconds. Knows that I'm a diehard fan of all the teams here, diehard Michigan State guy, and it's been hard. And people say I'm a curmudgeon and that I'm a bad guy and I'm so negative, and I would just say, what am I supposed to be happy about? But I can't say that anymore because a new era of Detroit Pistons basketball is upon us, and welcome to it. The Detroit Pistons officially drafted Cade Cunningham first overall, and it is a packed show tonight, but I have to tell you, this is going to be an obnoxious level of enthusiasm on my end because I'm very excited. And it got me thinking with this whole direction of where they're going. I'm a historian of the game. I wouldn't say I'm an expert, far from an expert, but I'm a historian in that I like to learn what I wasn't around for, and I like to be really cognizant of what I am around for and sort of internalize it and think of it in a certain way. I'm a historian of the game, not an expert historian. And looking at the Pistons historically, when they have won big, it's always looked a certain way. There's only really one way they've done it. They had a distinct feel to them. It just looked a certain way. It instilled a certain sense in the fan base. We remember them in hindsight in a certain way. And you could say that about any champion, I guess. I mean, we typically remember champions as being good. The 2011 Dallas Mavericks, we say they were good, obviously. Even the LeBron James Heatles, they were very good. Maybe their identity is the original super team. But that's typically the end of the legacy for 99% of champions in any sport. They were really good. And that's a hell of a legacy, but they don't stand out. The Pistons are unique in this way, and especially unique because they've done it in two different eras already. They've just looked different. They do it differently than anybody else. And you can start with the bad boys, knocking guys down. Nothing goes uncontested at the rim. Everything is a struggle, a battle. There was a snarl to them. In fact, there was an entire book written about the ferocious defensive tactics that the bad boys used to stop Michael Jordan, called the Jordan Rules. Still one of the 5 most famous basketball books ever. That was their identity. And we all remember it. And if you weren't around for it, we all know about it. We all saw the 30 for 30. And you fast forward, they had some doldrum years. We get into the going to work era. You had play the right way. You had holding 5 straight opponents under 70 points. They were grinding. It was a team of cast-offs. Chauncey Billups had been on his fifth team by the time he got here. Rasheed Wallace was traded around, was a renegade. Ben Wallace, undrafted, eventually dumped by two different teams. That was their identity. And really, if that team in particular was the one notable exception to that, you have to have a superstar to win a title rule. And now we're up to you need three. You need at least two superstars. A lot of people think you need 2.5 at least now in most years to win. That team had zero. A different identity. Going to work Pistons were different. And I don't know if it's something in the Detroit city water. I don't know if it's because the city of Detroit is somehow inherently unglamorous and built on grit and grind and toughness. That may be it. I don't know what it is, and I don't purport to know, but it's something. And that's been the case whenever they've been good. It's always looked a certain way when this thing got rolling. Toughness, chip on the shoulder, a get the hell out of our way attitude. And this week, gloriously, the Pistons draft Cade Cunningham first overall. And it got me thinking. We're getting back into the same basket that we were when things were going really well in two different eras. One scouting report called Cade Cunningham, quote, a bulldozer, unafraid of anything, a complete basketball junkie. He will never back down from anyone. A college teammate at Oklahoma State called Cade Cunningham, quote, extremely intense. If you don't match his intensity, he'll kill you in practice. Nothing rattles Cade Cunningham. Does that sound like a bad boy to you? Do you think if Cade Cunningham were on the 2004 Pistons that he would have stood right next to Chauncey and Rasheed and Tayshaun and stared the Shaq, Kobe, Karl Malone, Gary Payton juggernaut Lakers in the eye with them? Does that sound like a guy that would have taken up that battle? Does he fit the mold? I would say the Detroit Pistons did more than just draft a really good basketball player, which they did. They redrafted their old identity this week. They redrafted what has worked twice in two different eras to extreme degrees, winning at the highest level possible. It's an identity that has led them to the mountaintop in two different eras. And it's the only identity we've seen them have that worked. And it worked to the best degree possible. So, look, they won't be winning the title next year. The Bad Boys didn't win their first of two titles until year 8 of the Isaiah Thomas era. Took them a long time, almost a decade. The Going to Work Pistons, 2004, they finally break through. That was year 4 of the Ben Wallace Pistons era. So I'm not saying print your playoff tickets, it's going to happen right now, but it's on the way. I truly believe that. I think this was the building the foundation. And they started that. And it really, some seeds were planted last year. It was really kicked into high gear this week. Cade Cunningham is the jolt that this city needed, not just the basketball team, but the whole city across the whole plains, the whole atmosphere here. He is the key, but he won't be going at it alone. And he's not the only one embodying this identity. Look at Jeremy Grant, declares for the draft 7 years ago, leaving Syracuse. His own coach, Jim Boeheim, says, hey, 2 years isn't enough. Jeremy's not ready. It's going to be real tough for him adjusting to the league. Jeremy Grant said, I'm going to bet on myself. Carved out a really important role in Denver. Was very good on a very good playoff team. Contract comes up. Gets the same offer from Denver that he got from Detroit. Same exact money to the dollar. Wants to go to Detroit. Why? He's going to bet on himself that he can be the number one guy somewhere. He doesn't want to be a role player anymore. We made fun of him. Writers across town made fun of Jeremy Grant. I'm going to bet on myself. Awesome year in year 1 with the Pistons. Didn't care. Snarled to him. Isaiah Stewart, we talked about scouting reports. Isaiah Stewart, favorite on this show, was described by one scout as intimidating, physical, tough, a relentless dog that just keeps coming. Yes, I do believe the Detroit Pistons are back. I believe they're back. And they're not at the peak of being back, but they're on that mountain and they're climbing. And boy, did I miss them, because it's been a long time. But it's good to see them again. So with that said, what a time to have one of the hottest new writers in town, not new to this area, but newly back, the Detroit Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press, a certified Spartan dog himself, so he feels right at home with our Paul Bunyan trophy over his shoulder, fresh off a 6 a.m. flight from New York City covering the draft. It's Omari Sankofa. Welcome to the Spiro Avenue Show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Happy to be here. Obviously, I mean, you kind of just ran through the entire gamut right now, but they have Cade Cunningham, and it's a great time to be covering the team. So I'll be fresh off the flight. Everything's still in my brain, so this is perfect timing.
It's been a whirlwind for you. What a crazy time! I mean, I was impressed that you kept the date, that you made it, and that you kept it to be here. It's tough, 6 a.m. flight to New York. So you heard the opening. Pistons take Cade Cunningham. And it's obviously on its face a big story. Everyone knows why. They drafted a hell of a player. That seems to be the consensus. What do you make of sort of my take on it? It feels like there is a conscious leaning into the history. It's not just we're a team, we're trying to build, we're trying to add this good player, this asset. It is a conscious decision to lean into that successful bad boy going to work era. Do you sense that?
I think it is a conscious decision, and it's happened. I think on some level it's happened sort of organically since. I think really when you look back to the Bad Boys 30 for 30, it sort of put the Bad Boys back into the public consciousness outside of just Detroit. This season, last season, you see a lot of, these are young guys coming in, obviously like 19, 20 years old. They're all talking about just how cool that era was. They weren't around to watch it. I wasn't around to watch it. But it's cool, right? You have this team, they're cool, they're tough, they snarl, they were the team that Jordan had to get through. And I think that branding is really appealing, to a lot of these young players, just because it kind of goes against what's said about the NBA today. People are saying that they take so many threes and, there's not the low post play anymore. So I think some of that just kind of roots back from that. But also when Troy Weaver took over last summer, he said a lot of the same things. Troy Weaver, I mean, he's been around for a while. He's been a coach, he's been a scout, he's been a GM. I mean, he's a basketball lifer. And he is naturally that way. Everybody you talk to about Troy just says this guy doesn't flinch, he's tough, he knows exactly what he wants to do. There's no hesitation. And he evoked the Bad Boys when he first came in. He talked about wanting to get back into that style of play. When he drafted Isaiah Stewart, he talked about getting a Dennis Rodman, Ben Wallace type, somebody who's an enforcer, somebody who's going to rebound and play defense and rally the troops together. So I think a lot of that comes from the top down, certainly from Troy. Some of it's organic. And then, of course, we have Cade come in, and he's wearing number 2, the Chuck Daly number. I mean, you really can't get more on the nose than that. So it's just a lot of things kind of coming together at once, but it does feel like something that's both intentional and organic at the same time.
Yeah, and it's like, again, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just because it's not a glitzy and glamorous city with beaches like Michigan. We love it. Like, we're Michiganders. We love it. But like to other people, it just does not have the same appeal as South Beach or Manhattan Beach out in LA. But for whatever reason, it has to look like this for it to work. It's just how it's been. And it seems like it is I love that he's using the term Troy Weaver restore, because it is a restoration to sort of the founding principles of those 2 championship teams, or 3, but 2 different eras that delivered titles. Like, obviously, Cade Cunningham's a great player. His talent's undeniable. We can all see that. Anybody that watched college basketball at all last year or has done their homework knows he's a great player. But it goes beyond that. Doesn't Cade Cunningham, specifically just his attitude, his leadership style, feel very Detroit Pistons?
I think it does. I think he is a guy that, I mean, and you talk to people about Cade as well, and they all say that he's just mature beyond his years. I mean, everybody who's seen his interviews from the past couple of days, and even last Friday when he did his pre-draft, he is very, he's very straightforward, but I think that maturity and that leadership comes through in the way that he talks. And you look at, just the past leaders of the Pistons, and they were all guys, I think, that were just, of a similar mode. I mean, obviously, Rasheed Wallace was a guy who, was known. And, and I don't think Cade Cunningham is Rasheed Wallace. I don't think he's going to get 20 texts a year. But, as far as just being somebody who is very much, we're good, this is who we are, and we're just going to outwill the other team. Cade Cunningham, you just talked, like I talked to his former coaches for a story a couple of days ago. He's a guy that rallies the troops. He brings the guys in. I think his high school coach, his first high school coach, actually said that. I'm sorry, it was Mike Boynton, his coach at Oklahoma State, said that Cade Cunningham is great, and he wants his teammates to believe that they're just as great as he is. Which, he comes into Oklahoma State and he's 18 years old. Like, that's an insane thing to say about a guy who's 18 years old. But I do think that he kind of carries that same mantra that past Pistons players had.
And the thing that's interesting with him that I found, and we mentioned like one of his teammates' quotes from Oklahoma State, but there were many. And his coach Boynton, every teammate that's ever gone on record about him, including back in high school, there's very, very, very few players that can have that reputation as intense, driving, will push the envelope in practice, and at the same time, not have his teammates despise him. Because, look, I like Kobe Bryant. I was always a Kobe Bryant fan. He's one of my probably 10 favorite players ever in basketball. He was intense. He was a champion. His teammates did hate him, though. Like, so even Kobe couldn't get that part of it right. Michael Jordan, the best player ever in my estimation, couldn't get that part right. It's so rare to have a guy that can have that intensity, drives the tone of practice, does not put up with any crap. If anybody's slacking, apparently they get an earful from him as the freshman on the team. But yet everybody loves him. Like, it's almost, he's a savant at navigating leadership, and it's such a contrast to what we've seen. I mean, again, we can go way back, but I mean, Ben Gordon looked like he didn't want to be here. Charlie Villanueva didn't look like he wanted to be here. Austin Day, I just think, wasn't tough at all. You get right down the list, Rodney Stuckey. We haven't had sort of that attitude in a long time. I think it goes beyond how good he is and that he's even a cultural fit, which he is. But I think they have a unicorn, if not in talent, in personality, combined in leadership. Like, don't you see him as a unique, like, one in maybe five guys in terms of balancing that intensity, but also everybody loves the guy?
I think so. And it's a very thin line, right? Like, you need to be able to get on guys without making them doubt that you're still rooting for them and want them to succeed, right? I think that's a very tough balance to get down. But it makes it a lot easier when you're a guy that also, the ball's in your hands and you're the one that's guiding them to victory. I think that gives you a certain amount of clout that you don't have if you're, not that type of guy. Cade, he was the number one player in his class, and it was a talented class. I mean, you had Jalen Green and Evan Mobley. Obviously, those guys would have went number one in last year's draft. I think ESPN actually had Jalen Green on top of Cade at the end of last year. But anyway, the point still stands. And just overall, I think Cade, like, when you are as good as he is, it is easier to get away with certain things. I mean, we even saw the Michael Jordan doc. I mean, he punched Steve Kerr, but they still came to work the next day. They didn't have to hash it out, right? Because what are you going to do? It's Michael Jordan. When you're that good, I think that does buy you a little bit more leash. But just what I've heard about Cade, he's not, like a mean person. He is just very much, we need to win. And he's going to do what he can do to get you to play on his level. So I think that makes it a lot easier, obviously, when you're, as good as he is and you come in with those credentials.
And the fan base is already, the approval rating's 100%. I've never seen, like, even before the draft, and he puts on the buffs and, it makes the appeal and throws out the first pitch at tonight's Tigers baseball game. He was already, like, in a 100% unanimous approval. And we haven't really seen that here in a long time. Usually Piston fans, me included, were furious that Mitchell wasn't the pick and we picked Luke Kennard. It's Devin Booker. It's a little revisionist history. There were some people that wanted him, but it's like, we're never happy with the draft pick. It's like we've been in such a doldrum as a city across the board with the sports teams. It was like this one beautiful unifying moment. Like, I want to talk a little bit about the fit. So obviously, cultural fit, great. Talent, great. City needed it, great. Some people, the only pushback I've seen sort of nationally, not locally, but nationally, is this fit with Killian Hayes. Now, I would argue, don't worry about that. Take Cade Cunningham and figure it out later. If you can't figure it out, no problem. Like, Cade's the priority. But it seems like it would be better if it did work. I'm not giving up on Killian Hayes, the youngest guy in the draft last year. Some people say they're not compatible, though. They're sort of conflicting, that Green would have been a better system fit with this team and the group that's already assembled. Like, how do you see that working out? Are they going to be able to play together, or is this team going to move on from Killian Hayes in a year?
Well, I think just as far as backcourt fits, there are certainly worse fits than Killian Hayes and Cade Cunningham. Cade is 6'8", Killian is 6'5". They're both guys who project as above average defenders. Obviously, they both have great vision. I mean, we saw Killian throw some, insane passes last year. And, Cade's also a really great shooter. He's one of the best shooters to come out of the draft. And he can hit them in a variety of ways. Step back, spot up. There really isn't a three he can't hit. So I think that makes it a lot easier when you have a guy like Cade who could very easily play off of Killian. If you need Cade to occupy that, more, like wing primary scorer role, but he's not bringing the ball up the floor every single time, he can do that. I think Cade coming in does put pressure on Killian to improve his game in areas that he didn't necessarily show last year. He wasn't a great shooter, of course. He's going to have to get used to being effective without the ball in his hands. And they did play him off of point guards a lot. He played a lot next to Corey Joseph towards the end of the season. He had one game when they played him next to Saban Lee. Early on, he played next to Blake Griffin and Derrick Rose a lot. So even last season, before it was even, known that the Pistons were going to, get Cade Cunningham, they were already prepping Killian to fulfill that sort of role, which I think was less about, who could come in and more about, this guy's 6'5", like we need him to be able to play some, a bit of that off-guard role too, just because he's so big. So I think there's going to be a filling out process because I think Cade is best with the ball in his hands. And I think Killian is best with the ball in his hands. And there's going to be a filling out process when they figure out, okay, 5 seconds left. Killian's been here for a year, but Cade's the number one pick, right? Like who's going to concede that to the other player? And I don't think it'll be like a rivalry or anything like that. I think they're both going to work together and they're going to figure it out. So as far as fit, there's some question marks there, but I think overall, I'd rather have Killian Hayes and Cade Cunningham as a starting point than like a guy who's 6'1" to 6'2" or something like that, right? Like there's a lot of upside here, and everything else. These guys are young, they'll continue to grow. Cade already addressed the elephant in the room, like yesterday. Killian's going to help me, I'm going to help him. They're both aware of it. I think ultimately it's going to be fine.
Do you think Killian, maybe for a fact, like, is Killian bummed about this pick? Was he hoping for Mobley? Like, do you have any sense of kind of what he's thinking?
I don't think he feels that way. I can't say for a fact, like what he's thinking, but at the end of the day, the Pistons won 20 games last year, and I think more than anything, they want to win.
That was the Troy Weaver thing. He goes, hey, like, who's a Fed? He goes, everybody's a Fed. There's no position that, we're so good here, we can't potentially look at any changes to disrupt that apple cart. But.
Exactly. So, Killian, he comes in, and he was also hurt last season, right? He only played 26 games.
Yeah, he had a really bad injury, a hip injury, missed most of the year.
Yeah, so I think, on some level, if you're Killian, you're probably like, this guy's going to make my life a lot easier, right? It takes a lot of pressure off of me to be that guy. And I think that works out because, Killian, it was more of the upside pick, right? You had him and Halliburton. And Halliburton was a guy who's going to be good right now, and Killian's a guy that has the tools to be a much better player down the road. Now you have a guy like Cade who comes in, and I think it frees Killian up to do a lot of things. Also, Killian was on record after a game last season. He said he likes playing off ball because it does free him up to do, things that you can't do when you have to have the ball in your hands. You have to create looks for yourself. Because I don't know if that's like Killian's best role, 100% of the game. I think he's a guy who is going to exert a lot of energy on defense. He's a guy that, he is going to be a spot-up shooter. He isn't that right now, but that is something that he wants to add to his game. So, you always want to be the guy, but at the same time, if you want to be great in the NBA, you got to have multiple guys who are doing that. And, I think overall, you should be able to see the big picture there.
I agree. It's kind of the whole positionless era of basketball, right? And you got to be able to do multiple things. Like, Larry King, who recently passed away, famous broadcaster, had the Larry King Live show for years and years, like 40 years he was doing live TV. And he had this rule where he said, if you turned on his show at any given time, you're just flipping in the middle, you turn it on. 95% of the time, his goal was to have his guest speaking and not him. He wants the guest to drive the conversation. I'm probably higher than 5%, but that was his goal. I'm flipping through. I'm watching the Tigers game or whatever. I'm busy. I'm mowing my lawn. Throw on the Pistons game. What percent breakdown? Who's going to have the ball between those two guys? Like, do you see Cade Cunningham being the primary driver of this offense? Because I think Killian's going to be playing mostly off ball. That's kind of what I see.
I think Dwayne will stagger him a little bit. I think probably leading off, you probably have the ball in Cade's hands. And then you sub Cade off, and maybe Killian closes the first quarter, leads off the second. I think you can run sets where, for one, Dwayne likes to have multiple guys bring the ball to the floor anyway. Like we even saw Mason Plumlee bring the ball to the floor sometimes last season. So there's a lot of flexibility there. But overall, I think when you look at the split, you're probably going to have the ball in Cade's hands more often just because he's just far more of a weapon right now than Killian is. I think Killian can get there But, yeah, I mean, Cade, I mean, he could hit a pull-up three. He's just pressuring the defense in ways that Killian can't right now. And overall, I think the way Killian plays in some ways, too, he was almost unselfish to a fault sometimes last season. He would get to the rim and he would look to kick out. I think he's naturally an unselfish guy. So some of the stuff I think will resolve itself organically. Like you have a guy in, Cade who's very much, like I'm going to drive this team to victory, and Killian can fill in a lot of those gaps. So we'll see how it plays out. But overall, I think naturally, Cade's number one pick, he's the guy that's coming in as sort of like that alpha dog role, and you want him to do that. He's probably the one that's, opening the game and closing the game with the ball in his hands.
And I think it should be. I mean, the analytics crowd had a couple. I mean, most of them still had Cunningham number one, but the analytics crowd was not thrilled with the assist-to-turnover ratio. Assists were low, turnovers were high. With Cade Cunningham in Oklahoma State his 1 year there. I would say anybody that watched that team, I probably watched 5 or 6 like full Oklahoma State games and parts of others, obviously, when they were in the tournament and that. This guy would draw 3 defenders, kick the ball to a wide open guy, and they'd miss the shot like 10 times a game. I mean, I feel like anybody in the NBA, for the most part, is going to make the majority of a shot wide open. And I just think that, like, the eyeball test sort of mitigates any concern there. I don't know where you stand on this, but, like, the one sort of knock on the turnovers and the assists, it's like, if you actually watch the games, I don't see it as a problem, but I could be wrong. Where do you stand on that?
No, I agree. I think you watch him play, and this team didn't do him a lot of favors. I mean, their spacing was terrible. Like, he's driving, and he's, going through 3 defenders. I saw, some pushback on Cade. I mean, there really hasn't been much nationally, but a few people bring up his 2-point percentage wasn't great. Of course, I think he averaged 3.5 assists and 4 turnovers. Like, Cade was an incredible, like, his assist-to-turnover ratio was great until he got to college. You could say that and say, oh, well, that's because he got exposed. No, it's not because he got exposed. It's because it's really hard to be a great playmaker when, your team can't shoot and you are constantly passing over the trees trying to find guys and they can't shoot. I mean, his team didn't do him a lot of favors. And even so, he still got them to the tournament. But yeah, like it's like you said, you watch him play. Clearly, this guy's a great playmaker. Like, he's really good at, working the pick and roll. He's got great vision. He can whip, left-handed, right-handed passes. Like, there's not so many passes he can't make, right? And there was a lot of possessions that he bailed out just because he created something out of nothing. And you put him in the NBA with NBA spacing and, the NBA three-point line, and it's going to open the floor for him. And I think he's going to look a lot better. Of course, the Pistons are going to put some shooters around him too, because they won a great shooting team last year. But even last year's team had better spacing than Oklahoma State.
They're already working on it. I mean, Isaiah Livers is like 44% almost from 3 last year. I mean, we'll get to him later, but it is the ultimate, like, look, I like analytics. I'm a big believer in them as a tool, but I'm not beholden to them. And that was the only negative stuff I saw was this, assisted turnover ratio. But the analytics, the notebook, the computer sort of betrays the eyeball test. Like I said, anybody that watched that, you can easily see why that's in there. I have no concerns. In fact, I think he could actually be an elite passer and distributor and organizer of the offense. But the
only reason why he won't average 10 assists is because he's playing with Killian Hayes, and they're both going to be passing the ball.
Which is fine. I care so little. Like, if Cade Cunningham is a really good defender, which he has every ability to be, their system, by the way, I don't want to get too technical because our audience is going to fall asleep, but basketball, their defensive system is terrible at Oklahoma State. I mean, basically, it's the constant switching and guys looking around, getting lost. Anybody that watched them, it was total chaos on defense. So anyone making any assessment of Cade Cunningham defensively, it's even worse than the other side with guys clanging wide open shots and not getting open to begin with. But, like, I think he can be elite defensively. If Cade Cunningham is like, and this is to me his basement, like 18, 6 and 6, and really efficient percentages and a dog defender, like, you can win big with that guy with sort of the Pistons model, what we've seen before. I think he'll be better than that. But I don't care if he's Doncic in terms of stats. I think he can impact the game in so many ways. And again, the cultural fit, even Doncic, who is one of the, fair 5 best players right now. I mean, certainly top 10, but I'd say top 5. It seems like a little bit of a goofball. Like, I don't know. I don't follow the Dallas Mavericks that closely, but, like, he's a little silly, talking trash, like, in not a good way, and just seems like kind of a silly guy. Would I trade them straight up? We already know Doncic is Doncic, I guess. But I don't know. I think Cunningham has a chance to be better, if not in the box score, but just in terms of impact. I think Cade Cunningham is, if you could, in a lab, build a character guy and a leader, you couldn't formulate a better one. I just think he's the ultimate guy to drive this team out of the abyss.
For sure. I mean, his coaches, they all pretty much said the same things. Like, this guy is, like, he's going to take the heat off of you, right? Like, he's a guy that the people in the locker room respect. His coach at Montverde, Kevin Boyle, was saying that, he was 16, 17 years old there. And he was, talking to the coaching staff, like as equals, right? Like giving them feedback, or asking, can we do this or that? Sometimes they would say yes, sometimes they would say no. But it was very much we're in this together and we're all trying to accomplish the same goal, which, I think that leadership aspect really appealed to the Pistons, just knowing that you have a guy that's going to step in and immediately embrace that role. And we've seen it a lot, just the way he's talked about the city of Detroit, like he wore the buffs, like he's somebody who very clearly wants you to know that he's in this with you. I think we've already seen that, and just, everybody you talk to about him, that just seems to be the type of person he is.
He's all the way in, as he said. So we've talked a lot of Cade Cunningham, and rightfully so. I was saying last year, I've been banging the drum, playing the banjo for Troy Weaver for a full year now. It was James Edwards III. James Edwards III and I were the only two people on the planet that loved the Isaiah Stewart thing right away. Everyone was making fun of them. They had 17 centers, and why are you drafting this 6'9" center in the middle of the first round? I have loved everything he's done. What I did say was, it'll be interesting to see what the big move is, because he's got Bay. I think Killian will eventually get there. Isaiah Stewart. You could even throw Saban Lee in there. Jeremy Grant is a really good, elite third banana, very, very good second banana. I still don't think he's going to ever be the best player on a championship team. I hope he hears me say that, because they don't get mad at me and prove me wrong. But what was the big move? And I didn't know what it was. They're never going to attract that free agent. And I basically said, you have to get lucky in the lottery. Mm-hmm. And even if you pick fifth, you just happen to get the best guy. Sometimes that happens. It was answered. They got the guy that should be that guy. What's the next move? Where do you see them going? They have Cade. They have these other pieces, two guys that were on the all-rookie team. It doesn't seem like they're going to spend much this year, which I'm fine with. It looks like they're looking more for 2022 in terms of the big additions. What's sort of next for Troy Weaver? Because they have a lot of wiggle room with cap space projected into the future.
They do. I think their position, similarly to Atlanta, was last year when they have a couple of years and you have Trae Young and you have, some young guys along with him. And, like John Collins, obviously. And you're just in a position where you can make moves to just add those auxiliary pieces around them. They went out and they got Gallinari. They traded for Clint Capella. And, you just hope that, your lead guy is ready to take that next step. And if you just surround him with talent, it'll figure itself out. I don't know if the Pistons are going to get, you look at next year's free agency class. I don't know if they're going to get
Durant, a free agent.
They're not, you're not going to get Steph Curry.
No,
but if you could just go out and just, really just get some high level talent around those guys, I think you're in position to kind of make that move. Because again, you have Jeremy Grant, who's like I said, could be a great third banana or even a number two, because they still think he could get better. You have Isaiah Stewart, who already looks like a starting center. You have Sadiq Bey. It's tough to say what his ceiling is, but, he shot 38% from three last year. He's already really, really good. And you have Killian Hayes, who, it's tough to say what his ceiling is. He's already really good at some things that, I think his intangibles are really, really high. He's really smart. Maybe he can eventually become that second or third guy. And you already have Cade, of course. So a lot of those pieces are already in place, and now you have cap space. So I think it's probably less who's the best possible player we can get, and more what's just the best possible, team of role players we could put around our talented core that can kind of just get them to that next level. So they kind of remind me of where Atlanta was not too long ago, and of course they made the Eastern Conference Finals. So I'm not predicting anything, but I'm just saying, just the way that they're positioned, I think they can do something similar if they want to.
Yeah, I'm with you on the Killian thing. Backing up a couple minutes ago, you're talking about Halliburton, and you said correctly that everyone knew Halliburton was more ready to help right now, and Killian had sort of a higher ceiling. And then what happened? Halliburton is a lot better right away. And the majority of the Piston fan base is oh, we should have taken Halliburton. It's no, we knew going in, it was very clear. Even the biggest Killian Hayes supporters, of which I was one, knew, look, I agree. I admit Halliburton almost definitely will be better right away. but you can't judge that till 3 years out. That was the take before the catastrophic hip injury. So now it's like even more so kind of wait and see. But I agree. I think he can kind of be in that. When Jim Costa was on the show, a good friend of mine, 97.1 The Ticket, I know you've been following Jim for a while. He made the point, somewhat obvious but true and important, that the hardest thing to get is just that number one guy. And I didn't know where they were going to get him. And it was falling in the lap, which is why I'm very pro-tanking, by the way. So some of your colleagues are not. I've been saying it for a long time. Now they got him, and you said it. Now the mystery is solved. You don't have to somehow hope, which wouldn't happen anyway, that Kevin Durant's going to come here, Steph Curry's going to come here. You can find like another Jeremy Grant, like another guy who's the fourth guy on his team and wants to be the second or third somewhere else. Or, not this specific player, but at the time when Gordon Hayward was a free agent, nobody confused Gordon Hayward for being Kobe Bryant or Kevin Durant, but like still a very good kind of second guy. That can be enough now, especially in the East, which is historically worse than the West, my entire lifetime, basically. So I think they have, because of that pick and why it's so important, they have an easier, more accessible path to winning a title, which brings me to this. Dwayne Casey. I like Dwayne Casey. I think he is like perfect for the time right now. I'm curious where you land on this, because in Toronto, he was seen as like the guy that developed DeRozan, developed Lowry, developed the whole team. He raised these kids, got them better, coached them up. They all credit him. But he was not the guy to finish the job. He got axed at the finish line. Nick Nurse comes in and finishes. It has some shades of Mark Jackson in Golden State, sort of brought the team along, make it into the second round. Okay, Kerr comes in. Even looking locally, there were some other circumstances, but Rick Carlisle, when he was in Detroit, they were in the doldrums. He wins 50 games, back-to-back seasons after they had been winning 30. Got him off the mat, was coaching guys, got Ben Wallace playing the best ball of his life, and Larry Brown was the one that came in and finished it. I don't know what's going to actually happen, but I want you to project or share what you think Troy Weaver thinks. You think Troy Weaver's thinking, look, we know he wants to build a champion. He's talked about that. Does he see Dwayne Casey as, I got my guy, this guy can take me all the way? Or do you think he sees Dwayne Casey as the perfect guy to get these young guys to play hard and get strong, and then he's going to flip on them? Because there's sort of mixed opinions on Dwayne Casey winning at a high level.
I think they're committed to Dwayne Casey. I think back in May is when they extended him an extra year, which takes him through, 2024. Dwayne's in his element right now. Of course, you mentioned that he's a guy that, is known for player development. He comes in, you see Isaiah Stewart and Sadiq Bey, surpass most expectations in their first team and second team All-Rookie, Olympic select team. Killian Hayes really started to show something toward the end of the season after he came back from the hip injury. Jeremy Grant, he came in and had a really good season. Just even guys like Saban Lee and Frank Jackson, Diallo, players who come in and, fans probably don't know what to expect because they're not, players who were top 10 picks. But they come in and they become really, really good, supporting role guys. I think last season was a really good coaching job by Dwayne just to get these young guys ready to play. And, I think the other thing, too, is that, Dwayne is in his mid-60s. You wonder, will he want to coach forever? I think he'll be the head coach as long as he wants to be, barring anything extreme, obviously.
Right.
But I do think he has the full support from the ownership. I do think he has full support from Troy Weaver. And, I think his first season, just with this current, group of guys was really good. So right now, I think everything's kind of going in his favor. And, of course, I guess just from here, we'll see, how long it'll take for the Pistons to get to the point to where they are truly contending in the Eastern Conference.
I could make the argument, and I will, that for this team, I'm not saying blank slate in the whole league, but for this team as currently assembled, I don't know if I would trade Dwayne Casey for anybody in the league. If you look at as the coach, if you look at what he did in Toronto, we talked about it, bringing all those guys up, got them off the mat and into contention. You mentioned it, what he did last year. I mean, obviously Troy Weaver is supplying the ammunition, but how much better guys got from the beginning of the year to the middle to the end. I think he's arguably the best guy for this situation. I think it's like a perfect fit. I mean, don't you kind of see him as like the ultimate developer of these guys? I couldn't imagine a better fit.
Yeah, I think people tend to underrate just having really good positive chemistry between, your coaching staff and your front office. like Troy Weaver and Dwayne, like they're in this together. You hear Cade today, talk about how he met with Dwayne and he met with Troy beforehand, and they were talking about, restoring and everything. The messaging was the same. Everybody was on the same page. And I think when you're a player and you come into a situation when everybody's on the same page, everybody's giving you the same message, there's just synergy from top to bottom. It makes you feel a lot more comfortable about, where you are. And it makes you feel more comfortable, just about how you can grow within that. I don't, like, when you have that, I don't think you immediately look to shake it up. Because like once chemistry starts to go downhill and you have some of those issues, you mentioned Rick Carlisle earlier. Larry Brown left, because he had some issues with the front office too, or ownership. But it's just, you want to avoid that if you can. So I think last season was good. And yeah, that should definitely count for something 100%.
Yeah, I think they have like the perfect guy for this time. And the question will be, and we don't know, is when things get rolling, as I anticipate they will, is he the guy to win it? But I also think that you could say this about any sport, but especially in basketball, Players League, man. I don't think 90% of these coaches that are winning titles are brilliant tacticians relative to their contemporaries and their colleagues. I think Players League. And if you have the best players, if you have the best player on the floor, you win 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10, and there's a couple exceptions, but I think it's player driven, and I think they're going to have the team. But for right now, there's no question he's the guy. So speaking of young guys, a guy that I'm really excited to see, specifically with Dwayne Casey in this lineup, what the lineup needs, what I think he can do if he stays healthy, Isaiah Livers. Now, we're both Spartans. I will say, as an opponent on the other side, watching a lot of Michigan basketball, Isaiah Livers was my favorite guy on the Michigan team the last couple of years. Now, Wagner was a better prospect, not disputing that, but Livers seems like perfect cultural fit. Everybody loves him, leader, plays his ass off. Biggest thing, shoots the lights out. I just think as a second-round guy, he has to stay healthy. I don't think this is one of those 5% lotto ticket second-rounders. I actually think this guy is going to help a lot. Where do you stand on Livers?
I think he has a chance. I think Livers, he's a player where if he didn't get hurt and he played the tournament and he had a really good run, and he plays a position that's very important. He really shoots the ball well. Maybe his draft stock would have risen and he would have gone a lot higher than 42. That's kind of how I see it. If he doesn't get hurt, he's got that 4-year pedigree. Zero character issues. Like everybody has great things to say about him. And he was like a career, 40-something% shooter at Michigan. Those are the guys that you take, right? Those are the guys where, I think the floor is just a lot higher because if you just play average defense and knock down threes, then you're playing in the NBA for 12 years, right? Because those guys always play in the NBA for 12 years. Of course, we have to see, I'm not exactly sure where he is as far as his, recovery from that injury. But, when the Pistons, it was 42 and he was on the board and the Pistons have a clear need for shooting. It's like, and John Beilein is understaffed now. That's just an absolute, to me, I thought that was a no-brainer pick, and they did it. I know he's happy to be home. And, we'll see how he pans out. I think that'll be a great test for the Pistons player development program. You have the Motor City Cruise coming in next season, and we still have to see where they are roster-wise, because right now they have more guys than they have spots. So, still have to see exactly where Isaiah would be in the pecking order next season right now. But he's definitely a guy that can stick around, and I think that was a smart pick.
Yeah, I love that one. I think what I read was September. He's supposed to be 100% good to go, but you never know. We heard that about Grant Hill 26 times. Those ankle injuries are particularly kind of iffy, that no one knows, but I don't know. I like it. The Luka Garza thing, I just think it's fun. These Piston fans are so mad about Garza. Some of my friends, Isaac said this is so perplexing. It's
it's the 52nd pick.
Look at, if we just did a blind look of if we had Ben pull up on the fly here, everybody that went, let's say, for a bigger sample size, 50 to 56 the last 10 years, we might find 2 guys, 3 guys, out of 60 that are real guys, that were not the 11th guy or just didn't play at all. I don't know. I think it's fun. The Garza thing, you don't see any problem with taking a chance on the eyebrows from Iowa, right?
For sure. I saw some people kind of upset with what the Pistons did in the second round. And it was the last 18 picks of the draft. The vast majority of players you pick in the last like if I put up my phone and just went through the last like 10 years, like you maybe find 10 guys picked in that range who had a career, worth mentioning. So in the grand scheme, like it's really nothing to spend any energy on at all. But if you are going to take a risk with a guy for the 52nd pick, like the best player in college basketball last season is probably a guy that you take that risk on, right? And he does have clear NBA skill. It's not like, this is a guy that they found off of the street. Like, this is a guy that is an elite post scorer. Like, he's just like a dancer in a low post. He was an elite shooter. Like, this guy can really play. The only question marks really for him are on the defensive end. And if he's a guy that only plays 5 to 10 minutes a night and just gives you spacing at the 5, then that's valuable because all teams need guys who can shoot, from the 5 because that is a very deadly weapon to have on offense. And you could probably play him next to Isaiah Stewart, knowing that Isaiah can protect the paint a little bit. Like, I don't see it as, like, do I think he'll last in the NBA? Like, it's the 52nd pick, right? I mean, of course, I was hard against him, but at the same time, it was hard for me to kind of understand the fretting over, a guy who was the 52nd pick and had like this incredible career at Iowa. If you're going to take a guy with that pick, I think you take a guy like that personally.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I wouldn't play him against Memphis because we know what happens when he sees Xavier Tillman. But absent of that, as long as Tillman's not in the same zip code any given night, I think he can be effective. And it's like if you get with the 52nd pick, a guy that plays 3 years for you and gives you 7 minutes a night and doesn't like fall down, it's a win because you're already like in the upper 95 percentile of guys in that range. So yeah, everyone needs to calm down. Just look at Cade Cunningham's sunglasses and all the memes that are out there. Just bask in it. It's like, can't we just have one night? It's bad when I'm telling people that they're too cynical. It's like, come on. So I love it. Let's finish with the Pistons here. Where do you see the timeline? Because I'm optimistic. I laid it out. I'm not putting an exact year on it, but I believe that this group will win a title or they lose Game 6 of the NBA Finals by 2 points. Like, I think it's so hard to say any team's going to win, but I think they are going to be extremely viable and either get there or be on the doorstep 3 to 4 years or so. Do you see them on a path to that? And what's sort of the peak for them and how soon can they get there?
I think they're probably 2 years away from comfortably making the playoffs. Like, I know that's probably a goal for them next season. But you just look at the East, and of course the East historically has not been very strong. But at the same time, almost all the teams that made the playoffs, like last year, probably going to be right back in it. You have a team in Charlotte that's up and coming. You have a Celtics team. No, I'm sorry, not a Celtics team. A Chicago team that just traded for Vooch, and of course they really want to make a leap forward next season. And these rebuilds are just never, ever linear, right? Like, I think year one, you have all the rope in the world, and, people are just happy that you have some young guys who look like they're going to play pretty well. And, you're not really judging them that harshly. And then year two, those expectations goes up, and it's like, okay, we don't want these close losses every night, right? Like last year, it's like, oh, wow, we're, competing every night. Yeah, and then next year, it's like, okay, like, we can't do this 2 years in a row, right? But realistically, when you have guys who are that young, it takes them a while to figure out how to win. So of course the Pistons could, exceed our expectations, just because they got the number 1 pick and they have Cade. But, more often than not, and I look at it, as a guy who covered the Memphis Grizzlies, during Ja's rookie season. And then, like last season, you're looking at the Grizzlies fans because the Grizzlies aren't playing quite as well as you want them to. And it's like, Ja still only, he's not old enough to drink yet. It's like, of course, they're not going to make this massive leap forward. Because they're still very much learning. They still have rookies who are big in their rotation, and that's going to be the Pistons next season. You have rookies that came off of an irregular pandemic year. Killian Hayes is still going to be like almost like a rookie in some ways because he didn't have summer league. He went 8 months without playing because the season got cut short when he was in France. And he's doing some things for the first time. I mean, he only played 26 games. Like, these guys are still very early in their development. So it's tough for me to predict that they're going to make the playoffs next season, even with the play-in, just because I think you have to account for some sort of, just irregular, like, they're still figuring things out. But I think by Cade's second season and the rest of their young core, they're in year 3. I think they're going to have a level of polish, especially when, you have some cap space, unless they do something, crazy next week. And you're getting some more vets in there, maybe. I think realistically, that's probably when you can look at this team and you can see them being, like a 5th seed, a 6th seed. Maybe you get into the playoffs and maybe, you just kind of catch fire. You get the right matchup and whatnot. So I kind of see this like by 2023, I think they will be, some sort of threat in the Eastern Conference. And, I think next year you just kind of have to give them that extra year of just figuring out how to do certain things because this team is still extremely young.
They do have a ways to go. And I mean, back to Killian, not only did he have all these setbacks in the COVID situation, he was the youngest guy in the draft to begin with. So like there is a lot of development yet to be had. I do not think it's crazy. Again, you have the caveat, everyone has to be healthy, all that stuff. But like assuming things go well and the best version of how things could go in this year, I don't think it's crazy to suggest that we could be 10 games left to go in the year and talking about scenarios where they make the playoffs. Maybe they're 3 games back and we're starting to look at, okay, we're 3 games in back of the Magic or whoever, probably not them, but somebody. Right. And it's like they have a tougher schedule. We start to weigh that. That's the impact I think Cade Cunningham can have. But I do agree. I think Cade's second year is when we really start to look at, like, we start to see these things happen. Stewart's in year 3, Sadiq Bey's in year 3. I don't know. I'm optimistic. Do you think that this team is sort of in a title path 3, 4, 5 years from now? Because I think they have those seeds that you need to have planted.
I do think they have those seeds. I think Cade Cunningham clicks that into place.
Yes.
Before they won the lottery, it's like they still need to find that guy, and I don't know who that guy is. Now that they have Cade, I think that just puts them on a very clear path going forward. You have your guy who might be your number 1 guy. Even if Cade Cunningham is like an elite number 2, and you have Jeremy Grant and these other people who are like, they're really, really good. But that's still probably going to get you a 4-3 seed in the East, right?
Yep.
I think that's still probably enough. But Cade definitely, I think, puts them on a path where you can see the outline of this team really doing something by the time, Cade's ready for his extension in a few years. So, I think for sure they have a lot of what you already need. They got 3 big, pieces, of course, and like your lead playmaker and Killian, your rim protector and Isaiah Stewart, and then your kind of like wing gunner and Sadiq Bey. They've gotten sort of the dirty work out of the way already. So from here, it's just letting these guys develop and seeing where they go. But I don't think they need to do anything too dramatic to get to that spot, now that they have Cade.
So, and I keep saying we'll finish, but one more thing on this Pistons thing. Cade Cunningham has been a Piston for just over 24 hours, officially. Is this Cade Cunningham's team already?
I think so. I think he's the number 1 pick. I think if you're, the marketing team, you're putting Cade's face on everything. I think he kind of carries himself in that way. I think he very clearly wants to be that. And he has the talent to be that too. I think for sure he's already the face of this franchise. This is a team that hasn't got a number 1 pick in 51 years. I don't care who was going number 1; they were going to be the face of the franchise.
Well, certainly in terms of marketing, but I mean like even in the room, like they're walking in with their duffel bag on the first day. And is Summer League in Vegas this year? I don't even know.
It is.
It usually is. First day of Summer League, he's walking in. I mean, Jeremy Grant won't be at Summer League, but Summer League guys, this is Cade's team. A couple months later, he walks in. Jeremy Grant, very, very good player, like on the Olympic team. This is Cunningham's team day 1, even with the veterans. I mean, I think it would be, but you kind of agree with that?
To an extent, yes. I still think you'll have guys like, I'm just sort of name out there like that. Said he bring Corey Joseph back just as a veteran. He's still going to have a lot of stake in the locker room. And, like Jeremy Grant, of course, he's way more established coming off the Olympics. It may be a case where, just from the team dynamic, it's 1A and 1B.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I do think Cade is coming in, and just because he's Cade and just because he has that talent and because he's always been that guy, he's probably looking at this like, this is my team, and if we win or lose, he's looking at himself, right? So I think at the end of the day, if you're just looking at who on the team is going to carry himself in that way, it's probably going to be Cade. So maybe it won't be like a day 1 type of deal. But by the end of next season, I think for sure, like this is going to be a situation when everybody's looking at Cade, like this is for sure the guy.
I feel that way, and I we've laid it out. I think they're on the path. I think this is they finally have a plan, even if it doesn't work. The plan is good. It's sound. Stan Van Gundy never had a plan. He mocked the very concept of tanking, hated it. This is a real plan that's being implemented by some real people that know what they're doing. I think Troy Weaver is hitting a lot of the same notes of Pete Dumars before he tried to extend artificially that window. And I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled with where they're at. You're a Detroit guy, Michigan State guy, covered Memphis. just for you, wrapping on the Pistons, man, what a great time for you to be back. Like, you're coming in right at the perfect time. You got to be thrilled about that.
Yeah, I was talking to one of my buddies earlier, and he's like, man, you go down to Memphis and they draft Ja, and then you leave and you come here and they haven't even hired Trey Weaver yet, and then they get Cade. And I'm like, man, I don't know what to tell you. That's just...
Some team should hire you to go to the lottery. You could be like the Ben Wallace. You'll be the lucky charm. They'll just bring you in.
Yeah, apparently, man.
Hell of a time to come in and happy for you. So, great talk on the Pistons. You know where we're going next. A little speed round. Let's rip through it. We'll have some fun. We'll be all over the map. I think we talked Cade to death, but I'll be talking about him for about 10 more years every day, probably. That's how excited I am. So let's get to the speed round. Cade Cunningham is here. Let's get to it. All right, I love our speed round tonight. This was one of the more fun ones for me to to prep for. So let's get it rolling. You're a Spartan. I'm going to start here with back-to-back Michigan State ones. Mel Tucker's Michigan State peak. I don't care about year. What will the best Mel Tucker team look like? What will the finish be like? Big Ten, Rose Bowl. What are we looking?
Ooh, that's a tough question because, I was talking to one of my buddies the other day, like, is D'Antonio, is that the new standard or a flash of the pan, right? Yet I think they did it long enough to show that this is a peak that Michigan State could get back to again. So, I don't know if there'll ever be a team that gets a national championship, but I do think they could get back to like that Rose Bowl, Cotton Bowl tier. For him, I'm going to give it maybe like 4 years just because he is starting off, from almost from scratch. But I do think they could get back there for sure.
I think from scratch would actually be an upgrade. But yeah, I agree. I mean, 11, 12 wins, I think he can absolutely get there. So anyway, speaking of Michigan State coaches of great note, Tom Izzo's retirement timeline. Everyone has a different answer. I've heard this is his last year, not from inside knowledge, just from fans speculating. I've heard he's got 1 year left. I've heard he's got 2 years left because his son is going to graduate in 2 years. I've heard he's nowhere close to retiring. Where do you land on Tom Izzo? How many seasons does he have left here?
Well, he's approaching 70 in 3 years, right?
Yeah, he's at mid late 60s. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think 70 is my magic number for him. I think you just look at the way college basketball is trending. I think a lot of the coaches sort of in that same generation as Izzo are just getting fed up with some stuff. And at the same time, I mean, Izzo's been doing it for a long time, man. I think I'll probably give it 3-4 more years. I think he's got some good recruits coming in next season. Obviously, you got Max coming in. He's still got some juice, still got some recruiting juice. I do think this is a team that can potentially get back there. And I think it's getting harder and harder to predict how these Izzo teams do every year now.
Yes.
Just because I think there has been more turnover. But I'm going to give it 3 years. I think after 70, it's probably a good chance.
That's fair. I mean, if I were like setting the odds, I would say like over under is 3. Like, I mean, I think it'll be right around there. I think it'll probably be exactly 3 or 4. I don't think 1 year left. I just don't see that. I think we would have like heard something. I don't know. Who knows? We'll see. So moving on. Michigan State topic, kind of. You're a Spartan. I don't know if you ever attended Burgerama. I've always argued it was overrated. Waiting 2 hours to save $1 on a burger is like, it's not worth it to me. I was the outlier. All my friends love that. Burgerama in East Lansing, overrated or underrated?
Ooh. I'm a big ramen fan. I was at Rama a lot.
So you're an underrated guy. So
I'm say underrated because I think everybody... Like, whenever we all went, we had a blast, and it was just less. I think it was less about the burger and just more about, it was like $275 or whatever for like a
That's true. Right? Yeah.
And for like Thursday, too, I mean, it was just like, a pregame to the actual weekend. So I'm going to go underrated because I did have some friends that never really went, and it was just like, man, this was like my senior year. So
I differ from you, which is fine. It makes me go on. It's not that it was terrible. It's just like I would walk past my friends in line at the Riv and be like, all right, like I'll go spend the extra $4 and still hang out with other friends. It's not like I'm drinking alone. But
for sure.
Yeah, I admit you're in the majority. Everybody loved it but me. I was the one, Scrooge McDuck with the Riv Burgerama. So I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, you've done in your state news days some coverage on like the local hip hop scene and like sort of underground stuff. And like, is that accurate?
A little bit? Like early on, I
read some of your stuff.
Yeah, I was features and I did do some of that.
Okay, so I didn't want to like ask you this. And you're like, where the hell did this come from? Because when I was researching you and trying to come up with stuff, I like some of your stuff from like 2015. But I'm going to ask you the best hip hop artist that I don't know. Is there somebody that's not well known that you think is really good? I should be YouTubing after this.
He is. I feel like he's on the cusp of being a bit more well known, but he's been grinding for like years, and I still feel like he's not really that well known. Freddie Gibbs.
Freddie Gibbs.
Is
he local or is he?
He is not local. He is from Gary, Indiana.
Okay.
But he's starting to get a little bit more mainstream now, but he's really been underground. He probably got started in like 2009. I got into him around 2012 because my freshman year roommate was really big in underground rap, and he was like, man, you got to hear this, man. And I was like, oh, this dude is insane. But he is he's got like he's almost got like a soulful voice, but he's very much like an old school rapper in a way. Like just the way he flows on everything, his beat selection is insane. He's got a couple tapes with that I think like Pinata and Bandana are two of the best of like the last decade for sure. I mean, like he's just great. Like I don't think there's been 4 rappers just from a quality standpoint better than him in like the last 10 years.
Freddie Gibbs. See, I haven't heard of him, so yeah, you win. There
you go. Anybody who likes rap should listen to Freddie Gibbs like tonight.
We're gonna play it as soon as this show's over. I gotta say, like one of the articles I pulled, I don't even know if you remember writing this, but I was laughing my ass off reading it, going through it. You were talking about this like little known up and coming guy who's on the cusp of stardom called Chance the Rapper.
Chance the Rapper, yes.
This article's like 8 years old, and that was what inspired me to ask you the question because it's like, oh shit, you nailed that one. So
there we go.
That's I said I had to work in like who do I not know because if you nailed a big one there because at the time even the way you were wording it, it was like, look, I know no one's heard of this guy, but watch out for this Chance the Rapper guy.
Oh yeah, no, that was probably I mean, the same roommate got me in the Chance because he was from Chicago, and Chance is from Chicago, obviously. And he got me in the Chance right before Acid Rap came out in 2014. Or
the article I think was 2013. So
Yeah, and then back then I'm like, yeah, this dude is great. So I didn't think he would ever get as big as he is now, though. Honestly, like I thought he would get a lot more popular, but I didn't think he would ever become like everybody
take the victory lap, man. If I were you, I would take the victory lap because reading that in hindsight was hilarious because he's described by you as like this, underground up and comer that you think's gonna pop and that, and it's just like now it's just so funny reading that. So I had to ask you like, okay, who's the next Chance the Rapper? And
for sure.
So it's a big win for you. I was impressed by that. So anyway, good job. So I'm going to move to this. We got a couple left. You covered him for a minute. One of my favorite Spartans in recent memory, Jaren Jackson Jr. I'm curious, we can all watch his game. The guy, Jaren Jackson Jr., the guy. I've heard he's like the nicest, friendliest guy ever. Like, what's Jaren Jackson Jr. like?
Oh, he's so goofy, and he is just like
Silly
a really
guy.
nice guy. But he is a guy, like, he's just extremely personable. Like, he was just the guy that everybody on the Grizzlies loved. He was the guy just, like, super talkative in a locker room. Just super friendly, super genuine. I think the way he comes off, like, in interviews is just the way he is always. For sure. I mean, like, obviously he's extremely talented, and I think, assuming he stays healthy, he's going to have a big year next year. But, yeah, just always enjoyable to talk to. Like, just, he'll just have you laughing because he'll just say or do something really funny. He would always talk music. Like, he was really big into music, and I think he actually would rap a little bit. And just super goofy, personable guy. Just like perfect locker room guy, honestly. Like, I know everybody in that locker room loved him when I was back in Memphis. So
we're just like cranking those guys out in East Lansing. Like, Cassius Winston, McQuaid's like the nicest guy ever. Kyle Arn's the nicest guy ever. Miles Bridges. It's like something about, I don't know if it's Izzo or if it's a coincidence or what it is, but like all these guys are just like you could have a beer with them tomorrow and they're great. But
for sure. You never hear stories like, oh, that guy is awful,
No, never. I mean, there's one that I've heard bad things about, but I'm not going to slander the guy. But I mean, overwhelmingly, it's just something about the program. It's very like, family oriented and, friendly. They all love each other. And I don't know, but I've heard nothing. My friend Justin Thind, Michigan State basketball recruiting insider football as well. He's like actually friends with them. And I was like, how did you kind of maneuver that? He's like, oh, he's a nice guy. I just met him and we're friends now. It's like for most guys that are 6'11", everyone knew he was going to be a lottery pick like in a year. They're not that accessible, but yeah, I've heard nothing but good things. So I was curious about your stance on him. So we'll finish here. Sort of on the flip side, the yin to the yang with Jaren Jackson Jr. The most difficult athlete you've covered. Now, you're a young buck. You haven't covered for 30 years like some guys we've had in the chair. But and it doesn't even mean they were an asshole. Just didn't want to talk to you or whatever. Just had a hard time getting anything out of them.
Most difficult athlete. It's interesting. I think I've been lucky in a sense. When I first got to Memphis, the two main guys in our locker room were Mike Conley and Mark Gasol, like both extremely nice guys. I think Mark, like he was a little bit more serious than Mike, but at the same time, he would always give really great responses. There was never a time when he's like, "Oh, I'm just not talking to you." Like he would sit down and he would be frustrated, but he would sit down and tell you why he's frustrated, right?
Yeah,
So it was never
fine.
like, you close the door. Like next season, of course, those guys are out and you get Ja and, Jaren has a bigger role. Like I've covered young teams, right? And I think we have young teams. Those guys haven't yet developed that ego where it's like, oh, I just don't want to talk to you. Right?
Maybe you don't have one. I mean, I'm not asking you to make one. Yeah, don't throw someone under the bus falsely.
No, honestly. So as far as people I covered directly, I think I've had a really good experience. As far like if we're talking athletes as a whole, I could think of one experience I had when there was a guy who like was just like, okay, I don't know what just happened there, and I won't say his name, but he was.
You won't say his name.
He was a veteran. He's like
NBA
in NBA.
Okay.
In NBA, it was a situation. I was on the road, and he was teammates with a guy on the team I was writing about in the past. So I was like talking to people who do them and stuff like that. And I was waiting in the locker room, and I talked to PR. I'm like, is he gonna come out? Yada yada. And, actually, I talked to the people who covered the team first, and they were like, oh, yeah, it's kind of funny, but, I put in a good word, yada, yada. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I talked to PR, and they're like, oh, he's going to take his time, but, he'll see you waiting. He'll come out, he'll talk to you. And I'm like, okay, cool. I waited probably a good 35 minutes for him to come out. Like, locker room was empty. I was like to watch, like, I need to get going. Then he came out. It took him like 20 extra minutes to get dressed and all that stuff. And then he turned around, he took a look at me, he was about to walk out. And I was like, hey, I was going to, like, can we talk? And he kind of looked at me, he was like, are you serious right now? And
he didn't give you a quote?
And I was like, yes. And then the PR was, they kind of caught off guard, and they were like trying to like, talk him down a little bit. Then eventually, like, he did give me like 2 minutes, but it was just like, it's like, really?
I took the world's longest shower just leaving you out in the hallway with your notepad. It's a tough break. Well, I will be asking you off mic. I don't know, maybe you'll share that with me privately. But it was great to have you, man. Look, it's crazy that you're here. 6 a.m. flight this morning. Crazy day yesterday. You had to cover the media availability today. Give you a lot of credit for showing up here under these circumstances. Luckily, you're young. A lot of my guests of the geriatric class would not be here after the day you've had. I've really enjoyed your work early on. I reached out to you a while ago and said so. And, I think you're here at a wonderful time. We talked about it. This is a perfect time to sort of start the Pistons beat for you. And, wish you well, man. You're really great at what you do, and I recommend everyone check out your work at the Detroit Free Press.
Man, really appreciate that. I mean, I was born and raised in Detroit, so I think I always do deep down. If I had the chance to cover the Pistons for the Free Press, I'd probably do it. And, I left a Grizzlies team that was up and coming, so I had no idea what to expect. And you just look at this past year, and to be able to cover a Pistons team that really seems to have some momentum. Like, I think in the back of my mind, like, you're a reporter, you're a professional, obviously, but there's still like that, little piece of Detroiter in you that's like, just to see the city kind of rally around what's happening right now. You definitely feel, just blessed and lucky to be able to, come in and be able to cover that, and be able to kind of lift that veil a little bit and help people get to know the team a little bit better. So, hey, I'm having a blast and just ready to get back to normal so we can get some fans in the arena next season and, we just have an actual normal, like basketball atmosphere, right? Because most of these fans haven't seen Killian, Isaiah, Jeremy. They haven't seen these guys in person yet, which is really crazy. So, I think next season is going to be a big one.
Yeah, especially that team in particular will be fun to watch in person. Certain things don't translate as well on TV, just the way they play and how hard they play there. But even if this team doesn't reach what I think they can do ultimately, you're here for a first overall pick with all this buzz. Like, even if it doesn't work, like it's a cool story in a bad way, but it's been just boring forever here. I mean, even the end of that Billups, like Rip Hamilton team, I was okay with them falling apart. I didn't like how they did the quote-unquote rebuild because they didn't. But no matter what, this is a hell of a time. So it's good to have you home. We'll attribute all the good luck to you because you brought it to Memphis. You brought it here. Everyone said it was Ben Wallace, but I guess it was you. I'm going to give it to you. And even though you're modest about Chance the Rapper, Freddie Gibbs was the guy I got to look
Freddie
up.
Gibbs.
You were modest about Chance. You said, I didn't know he was going to blow up that big. Your article betrays you because you did say he was going to blow up. So I'm going to check out Freddie Gibbs. I'm actually going to have Ben throw him on as soon as we cut here. But it was great to have you. I'd love to have you back, man. And I'm happy for you. It's good to see another product of the Michigan State J School killing it, man. So it's great to have you, and I'd love to have you back anytime.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's going to be plenty to talk about, of course, whether it's the Pistons or Michigan State. So
I'll talk Spartans with you all day, man. That's sort of my bread and butter, as you may see if you look about the room.
I saw all the grades.
I know. It's blinding. So that was Omari Sankofa from the Detroit Free Press. Young Spartan dog coming up. Check him out. Want to say really quick thanks again to Wade Fink Law, wadefinklaw.com, for keeping our lights on here. We have a lot of them, so thanks for that. Then Augusta, the other side of the curtain there, the great and powerful Oz, who does an awesome job as always. I send him these sheet hours before every show, and somehow he makes it beautiful. I don't know how he does it. Eric Williamson, our set designer, graphic designer, 100% in his boxers on the couch watching this live right now. Thank you to Eric. And thank you to all you guys. Hey, we've waited a long time. Detroit, we're off the mat. We're not at the peak yet, but we're not on the ground either. It's great to be on the move. Exciting time. I'm happy to carry us through that on this show for all you watching. Spiro Avenue Show, episode 40. Nice round number for Omari. Thank you. We will be back on Sunday, a couple days from now, with a baseball-heavy episode. I think the Detroit Tigers were the only team that didn't make a significant move in the last 24 hours. Tony Paul from the Detroit News will be across from me, as well as Scott Anderson, not that one, but mine. Nice little Tigers panel. So 3 shows in a week. We're hot. Spiro Avenue Show, episode 40. Justin Spiro. Thank you. Have a good day. Have a good night. Have a good year of Cade Cunningham in year 1. We're off the mat. We'll see ya.